Today's program is really exciting, and I think it's going to help us all sort of lower the anxiety. Dr. Jonathan Walker is no stranger to this club, and he's going to talk to us about why mindfulness. But here's a little bio that he sent, and I just said, this is too good not to share with you all. He wrote, "You could make me sound interesting by saying that I was raised on a mountaintop by a pack of wolves and then ended up in Fort Wayne operating on eyeballs. But now I wander around telling people to notice their breath because I don't have anything better to do. But people might be more relieved if you say that I am a retired ophthalmologist as well as an honorary member of this club, because it was through Rotary's help that we assisted raising funds for an eye hospital in Nicaragua to get equipment that allowed them to be much better able to treat those with eye issues. And it's for that reason that he's extremely grateful to everyone in our club and around the world that make Rotary happen. Well, several years ago, John became interested in the subject of mindfulness. Largely, he says, due to his own existential misery. He's done training through the University of California, Los Angeles, and the University of California, San Diego, and he's certified through the International Mindfulness Teachers Association. So there's no question that a mindfulness practice can enhance well-being, and now he's working on bringing these skills to the region. So please give a warm Rotary welcome to Dr. Jonathan Walker.
Thank you, Lynn. Actually, could we stay on the Zoom room real quick, please? Thank you for that nice introduction. And thank you guys for having me here. And I do want to thank you again all for being Rotarians. It's certainly made a big difference for me in terms of how I've been able to help people around the world. I just want a real quick shout out to this dangerous person right there, Dave Johnson, your guest. He's actually one of my mentors when it comes to mindfulness, and he's done the lion's share of work of trying to bring these practices here to Fort Wayne, both in the regular community and the medical system. So thank you, Dave. You've probably heard this talk a few times. You want me to just stand in one place? Is that best? Or? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. And then you can go ahead and bring on the slides. And what time am I supposed to finish here? At 1 o'clock? Okay. I just have my little clock here. All right. So, yeah, as Lynn was saying, I came to this practice several years ago because a lot of things were going wrong out in the real world and in here, and the usual resources, spirituality, religion, family, vocation, avocation, they were certainly helpful, but there was this nagging sense of unrightness. Something was fundamentally incorrect. And I grew up in California and had dabbled in mindfulness and meditation and thought it was just New Age woo-woo. But I came to it almost out of a sense of desperation with no expectations. And if you try this, I'd encourage you to bring that approach. It took about 2 to 3 months for me to realize that something was happening. It wasn't what I wanted, but something was happening. And then after a year or two, there was no doubt that there's something fundamentally here, something that's useful. And that's when I decided to retool my career a little bit to direct myself in this direction. And, you know, I wish I could just give you a 5-minute meditation that would make it go away, all right? But unfortunately, that's not how it works. And if you resonate in particular with the top statement, I think you hopefully will enjoy this. A real quick question is, does anybody here have an ongoing meditation practice, maybe 15, 20 minutes a day, something like that? Okay, all right, so most of you don't. So why don't we just do a little meditating if you feel comfortable. Again, you certainly don't have to do this. It'll just be a moment or two. You can do it in any position, eyes open or closed. To contextualize it though, it's not about doing something and having something occur like getting calmer or more relaxed, all right? It's really about asking your brain to pay attention to something it doesn't want to, and then as your brain rebels, watching what your brain does. So this will be a very typical breath meditation, which is what you might pick up on an app or on the internet. And I'll be asking you to direct your attention to your breath, But the key really is to notice how quickly your mind wanders off, to recognize that, perhaps just label it as thinking, and then try to bring yourself back to the breath. And we'll go into why that particular move is useful. So, again, sitting in any position you wish, eyes open or closed, I'd invite you to take one maybe large deep breath. Maybe to just feel that breath, fill your body, and then just let it release. Meditation is not about breathing a certain way. So let your breath return to normal. And to start with, you might want to just check into your body. And what I mean by that is maybe scanning through your neck, your shoulders, jaw, looking for any tightness that doesn't need to be there. Maybe just releasing that a little bit, using the breath perhaps to soften that, relaxing any tightness in your chest, in your arms. And this isn't a relaxation exercise. We're really just trying to notice what's going on. And again, softening into the legs. And as you sit here, just noticing your body, try to pay attention to the one movement that's rather constant, and that's your breath. And as you do this, recognize that your mind is already commenting, judging, planning, wishing, all the different things the mind is doing. And see if you could just let that be, not let it go. It's probably not going to shut up in the middle of a busy day. So just allow the mind to think, but come to notice the breath. Perhaps the sensation of the air going in, the moisture, the humidity. Maybe pay attention to the exhalation. Maybe noticing a difference in the duration between the inhalation and the exhalation. Not necessarily doing a science project, but just using these cues as ways to bring your curiosity to the breath as your mind wants to comment and think and do all the things it does. Just be with this just for a moment. Again, thinking, noticing it, coming back to the sensations of the breath. And feel free to shift and move if you need to. You're not locked into position. Just an exercise of watching your mind. And if your eyes are closed, you can open them up, and that was it. So if any of you had a transcendent, blissful experience, please let me know, and maybe I'll build a Rotary Club for my time here. But most of you probably found that completely unremarkable, and you're right back in your regular lives, and that's fine. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so mindfulness, this is a standard definition, but I think I want to clarify something really quick. Will you go to the next slide? Mindfulness is really about awareness, okay? Actually awareness and bringing kindness to that awareness. When we meditate, that's simply a time where you focus on working on this awareness. In the case we just did, we tried to focus on the breath while the mind wandered around. And I want to make that distinction because really mindfulness is our human birthright. It's just, it gets so clogged up and layered over by the fears, the stresses, the anxiety, particularly in this modern era. Whereas meditation is where you actually take a little bit of time to work on that ability to focus. Can I have the next one? So, the definition of mindfulness is always a little bit confusing. Being aware of present moment experience with openness and curiosity and a willingness to be with what is. I'm not even sure I know what that means. So I like to talk about what mindfulness is not. And it's not this, okay? It's not sitting in the perfect position with the perfect sunset, the perfect outfit, the fashion industry's self-esteem destroying idea of the perfect body. No, this is marketing to get you to go someplace where there's smear avocados on your face or, rolling cucumbers or something like that. So dispense with this, okay? It's an advertising ideal. You can meditate, be mindful, every second that you're conscious. Go to the next slide. So, but getting back to this definition, there's a few other things that mindfulness is not. Okay, so have the next one. Mindfulness does not make the mind blank. Okay, as much as we would like that, if anything, mindfulness is about turning into that busy mind and seeing what's going on. Nor does it make you numb. Nice timing there, John. We have a real real mind meld here. And it doesn't tend to do these things, okay? Most importantly, if I get the next one, it doesn't require believing anything. There's a sense that mindfulness has to do with spirituality, and certainly these kind of contemplative practices are a part of all the world's religions, but certainly what I teach and what the research is dealing with is basically mind training techniques. And most unfortunately, I've yet to be able to levitate or shoot laser beams out of my eyes or anything that's actually useful. Sorry about that. But those are a few things that mindfulness isn't. Can I have the next slide? Another way of looking at it is the opposite of mindfulness, okay, which would be this thing we call mindlessness. And this is the state that most of us spend most of our days in. We'll have the next slide. The mind's very busy. Let's go ahead and click through the next three so I can get that's fine. Yeah, so, you know, we have tens of thousands of thoughts a day. And unfortunately, most of them are repetitive, okay? And unfortunately, another large percentage are just negative. And try that someday. When you wake up, you don't have a lot of things to do, maybe set your timer for 2 hours and see how many thoughts you had that were actually unique and insightful and useful. Again, I'm not telling you to judge yourself for not having wonderful thoughts, but just recognize that a lot of what our mind does is very repetitive and negative. We can go to the next slide. So we have this very busy mind that's just chitter-chattering away, puts us on autopilot, this constant running narrative, always worrying about the past or the future. And the problem is we tend to miss out not only on what we're experiencing, but we stop questioning the assumptions and conclusions that this mind comes up with. Go ahead, next one. So we have additional hardwiring that's built into us in addition to this busy mind. We're drawn to things that we perceive as pleasurable. We try to push away things that we don't like. And we often make profoundly unwise choices as we follow that program. And you're all familiar with the idea of, you know, you get something new, a new truck, a new kitchen or whatever, and within a few weeks it's fading away. Our minds are designed to just go from object to object, magpie to shiny object, all these different things. And we have a culture that feeds off of that, okay? This idea that we aren't enough as who we are, we need to obtain more. We'll go ahead and go to the next one. And this also this sense of pushing things away, all right? What mindfulness asks us to do is actually open that closet and see what comes out, because that gives us a much better way to understand ourselves and to interact with the world around us. Another bit of this wiring is the negativity bias. This is profoundly important to be aware of, to see this happening. We see it all the time in our culture. The news starts with something, if it bleeds, it leads, something horrible to grab our attention, because as part of our evolution, as part of our survival, we need to think of the worst case scenarios. The easiest way to think of it is if you have a review with your boss, you know, and they may say 10 nice things about you, but the one thing that's negative, that's what you perseverate on. So we store our negative experiences. It's like we're designed to fit bad, unpleasant, worrisome things into our head and keep them there, whereas the positive experiences tend to fade away. Again, this idea that our brain is designed for survival and not really happiness. We'll go ahead and go to the next one. There's other things that we have to deal with that evolution did not train us for at all, okay? And I think the most obvious one is something like Facebook or social media, where you can go anytime, day or night, and be reminded that everyone else has this awesome curated life, and your life is a hollow, empty shell. Can I have the next one? And hold on that. So for those of you whose lives are awesome and your Facebook feeds are awesome, I honor that. But for the rest of us, you can go ahead and read this slide, because one of the striking things about the classes I teach and the lectures I give, you go ahead and go to the next one, is I have very few dogs in my classes. So part of how we live our lives, go ahead and go to the next one, is this idea of a comparing mind. Okay, this is an extremely powerful part of how we think, and it has to do with animal packs. Okay, if you're at the top of the pack, you have less stress, you're more likely to survive. So we're constantly judging ourselves with everyone else, and thanks to the negativity bias, we're assuming that they've got it together and we don't. We'll go ahead and go to the next one. This is a busy slide, but I think it's important to remind us that studies suggest that about 60% of us walk around with truly traumatic childhoods, you know, alcoholism, abuse, all the different things that can happen. And certainly by the time we get older, it's probably like 99% have some sort of traumatic experience. And that alters who we are. It alters our perspectives, and our perception just changes our ability to be integrated. So this is another aspect of this thing we call mindlessness, the super busy mind, the negativity bias, the pushing away pain, the grasping for pleasure, the history of trauma. Go ahead and go to the next one. And if there's any slide you remember in this deck, anything that you remember what I'm talking about, I would suggest it would be this one, okay? Whatever else happens to us, we don't seem to be very good at taking care of ourselves. Again, our culture, families, backgrounds, our own thinking tends to have us feeling that we need to be something else. We need to be accomplishing more. We need to be a different shape, different color. You know, we just can't sit down and be compassionate with ourselves. This group shows that we can all be very compassionate with the world around us. But I think it's important to recognize, as Tammy Dyer says here, we often can't tell how deep our own sense of being unlovable goes. And then with all that stuff going on, you have to wake up and deal with the day, okay? The health issues, the economy issues, the virus issues, partners, sick parents, all this kind of stuff. It actually amazes me that as a society, we actually manage to function with all these different things going on. You can go ahead and go to the next one. So you know, we have all this built in, and the problem is this tends to land on us like 2 tons of mud when we're dealing with our troubles in life. We're often completely unaware of what this is doing. We have the nonstop narrative mind that's just commenting away. It's drawn to the negative. It wants to avoid pain and seek pleasure, often making profoundly unwise choices as it does that. Then we worry about the past and the future, and if there's any sort of trauma as part of our makeup, that just scrambles everything up. And we're busy comparing ourselves to everyone else and assuming, thanks to the negativity bias, that we're all messed up. And as this spins around, we can't even be kind to ourselves. Okay, so you know, I look at it like this. I think we all have a sense that we exist. There's a soul here, there's a spirit. You know, philosophers, religion, all those things can argue about what it is, but we know it's there. And this busy thinking mind arose as a tool. Okay, you can think about how wonderful it was 30,000 years ago. You come to a watering hole, you're thirsty, you're tired, and this voice in your head says something or clicks or whatever it did back then and says, don't drink that. You know, you threw up for 3 days. And you're, oh, thank you very much. And it's also the voice that got you through your childhood. It's the voice that gets you through your day. And the addiction psychiatrist, Judson Brewer, has this great line: we're all addicted to one thing, and that's thinking about ourselves. And the problem is this voice has got all this wiring. So it becomes enmeshed with who we are. So if things get a little bit bad, we're drawn down into depression. Or if we get a little bit irritated, we fly off the handle. A little stressed out, we go to a substance of abuse or all the other ways we have of unproductively dealing with our issues. And the promise of mindfulness is not that you can sit down and be totally zen in 5 minutes. It's that as this mind, this busy mind is bouncing around, dragging you all over the place, rather than being yanked around by it, you're kind of a little more stable. So the mind does its thing, and you're not as drawn into what it's thinking, what it's doing. You see it happening almost from a distance. Why don't you go ahead and go to the next slide? And the neuroscience of this is actually pretty fascinating, you know, and this is super basic, super oversimplified, but we think of the brain as in 3 main parts. There's the lizard part of the brain. Okay, that's basic survival. That's, you know, you see a shadow, you immediately jump, breathing, respiration, digestion, all that stuff. Then above that is the mammalian part of the brain. Still very primitive, but it's starting to bring online nurturing, emotions. A lot of the addiction wiring is down in here. That's why it's very, very powerful. But really what separates us from the animals is all this stuff here, particularly the prefrontal cortex, which is executive functioning. You know, that's our wisdom, that's our creativity, that's our planning. And ideally, as life hits us, okay, the mammalian part of the brain, the more primitive structures will start to freak out, okay? Our survival brain, our negativity bias can't tell the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and running a little bit late to the meeting. You know, it's all bad. So the mammalian part is busy freaking out, and ideally, the prefrontal cortex can come online and soothe it, pet the mouse or pet the lizard to calm it down so you don't freak out as much. The problem is, because this is more recent, it's also the part of the brain that tends to go offline when we are freaked out. So rather than being able to calm ourselves down, the prefrontal cortex goes offline, the mammalian part takes over, and suddenly we're spending our day stressed out and tight and anxious. And that moment when we did the meditation practice, where you noticed you were thinking and came back to the breath, which you might have had to do 10 times in the middle of a breath, the science is suggesting that recognizing that thought and coming back is the moment where you start to build the pathways between the prefrontal cortex and the more primitive parts of our brain. You're literally beginning to give yourself a little bit of space. You see the craziness coming at you, and rather than immediately reacting, you suddenly realize that you have far more choices about how you behave. Let me go ahead and go to the next one. And the reason I can very comfortably talk about this is because of this. You know, there's a ton of research. This is just counting the research papers on the subject. Now, a lot of the research is preliminary. Mindfulness needs to be defined. They need more instruments to do this, larger controlled trials. So when you read something about how, you know, mindfulness changes your hair color and helps you lose 10 pounds of body fat, you know, maybe give that a little bit of time. But there's no question that there's a ton of data that is suggesting that it can be a very powerful tool. Let me go ahead and go to the next one. You know, in a physician's office, it's estimated that a large percentage of visits are for stress-related or stress-exacerbated things. You know, after upper respiratory tract infections, and this, of course, is pre-COVID data, but there's all these other physical issues that we have, as well as mental and psychiatric issues that we have, that are exacerbated by the fact that we don't really have a handle on all of that programming, all those habits of mind that tend to make us worse than what we need to be. We can go to the next one. And rather than talking about a whole bunch of research, which I'm happy to do, I love this, this paper here. And first of all, mindfulness is useful for so many different things. And it's also not about making you better, okay? If you're actually doing pretty good, mindfulness is a very powerful way to enhance your ability to appreciate and savor the goodness in your life. But it's been shown to be helpful with stress and burnout for healthcare workers, but I'm really interested in how the military is using it, not only for treating post-traumatic stress disorder, but actually to improve operational effectiveness and stress tolerance in combat. And my point with mentioning this is, you know, if people like the Navy SEALs are tapping into this mindfulness in order to help them with combat, you might find that it's useful for you as you deal with unpleasant relatives across a Thanksgiving dinner table or coworkers that you find difficult. As a matter of fact, one of my mentors from San Diego worked with one of the people that trains the Navy SEALs as far as mindfulness. And interestingly, the SEALs often tell this person that the mindfulness, the meditation we just did at the beginning of this, they find it one of the more difficult things they've been asked to do in their training. So if you try to adopt a meditation practice and you're like me and you absolutely can't stand it for after about 30 seconds, know that you're in very good company. Okay, want to go with the next one? Here, suddenly getting existential. Okay, a nice Monday lunch, but I think it's also helpful to look at other viewpoints. And I think one very valuable viewpoint is the viewpoint of people that are about to die. All right, and I think you can see these things here. Maybe many of us immediately jump on number 2, but I would propose to you that a mindfulness practice can be very helpful with each one of these things. Okay, live a life true to myself. I don't know about you, but I've spent a great deal of my life attending to the needs of those around me. And at times I felt I don't even know who I am, which is okay. You know, you get to be a doctor, you get to work with Rotarians, you get to fix things. But you know, lying on your deathbed, wanting to have lived a life true to yourself, mindfulness is a great way of begin to explore what actually is true to yourself. And then the concept of working, working too hard, having worked too hard. Again, once you know what you're responding to, whether you're responding to the drives of the ego, the blue boxes there, or something that's more aligned with your core values, you may be able to sort out where you are on that spectrum. And, number 3, the courage to express my feelings. Again, so many of our feelings are initial reactions, often anger, frustration, rage, or immediate sadness. It helps to be able to watch those things and see the vulnerability beneath those feelings. Because as you begin to sense those, you can see them in other people. And I don't know, maybe the political system would even be better. But let's stick with this slide. Or interesting things, I'd stayed in touch with my friends. We get so busy, we forget the importance of simply feeling connected with another human being. Or number 5, I had let myself be happier. I give a whole talk on what happiness is. That's confusing right there. But just the fact that people would use that wording, I had let myself be happier, not I wish I had been happier, but the recognition that these are qualities that we can control. We're not stuck with our factory settings. We can get in there and twist the levers and turn the knobs and change who we are, often using techniques that are part of this thing called mindfulness. And just savoring the little things in life. Gee, I wish I'd enjoyed doing the laundry. I wish I'd enjoyed going to the grocery store, because there's a lot of stuff going on in those little moves that we don't appreciate. Or go ahead and go to the next one. The other thing is super important to understand is we talk about this mindfulness as though it's something to acquire, but it's not. It's our human birthright. It's who we are. This awareness, like I mentioned earlier, is often so layered with our busyness and our fears and our worries that we forget we have it. And as you can see from the slide, you think about times when you're totally aware, like childbirth, marriage, romantic love, where, everything is about that person that's just so wonderful, and then you get to know them and it falls apart. But my point is, there are times, physical activity is another one, or just going out in nature. That moment, particularly with the trees changing color, that you pause for a microsecond and just feel a lot more connected, perhaps. All that mental chitter chatter tends to drop away. You're just aware of that. And the difference is intention, okay? Nature will hand us these things as we go through our lives. Mindfulness gives you the opportunity to begin to search them out on your own, to seek them out on your own, to savor them, and to recognize them more and more. We go ahead and go to the next slide. I really enjoy Dan Harris, who apparently is extremely successful in the news industry. He rose to the top very quickly, was a combat journalist, did all kinds of different things. But unfortunately, he had real bad problems with depression, anxiety, and substance abuse. And he famously had a panic attack on national television. And those of you that have been gifted with panic attacks, however you want to look at it, you can see it in his eyes. He actually does a pretty good job. He's a pro, so you may not be able to tell, but you can see it's happening. He's just exploding there on camera. And he realized that if he continued living the way he was living, he'd probably just destroy his career, in addition to generally being unhappy. And, he being a wealthy New Yorker, he had access to all kinds of things. He could go to sonic baths or hyper alien psychotherapists. I don't, all the different things that are available on Manhattan. And he just came back to this very simple move of just starting to watch your mind from a position where you're following your breath or following your feet on the floor. And I love the way he puts it. We brush our teeth, we eat healthily, we decorate our homes, we decorate our bodies, but we often spend very little time attending to the needs of the one thing through which we experience our life, and that is our mind. And he's simply suggesting that you may want to throw this meditation stuff into your toolkit to help you out. And what I've done is I've given you a 2-page handout there of different levels. For instance, if this isn't interesting, and by the way, this isn't for everybody, okay? But if you aren't interested in it, fine. Just know that it's always here. You can always tap it. Or if you want to get into it a little bit, as the handout says, just take a few big, deep breaths. There's something about breaking that cycle of thinking in the middle of a hectic day that starts to give you a little bit of an edge up on how you're reacting. And then you can move on more, maybe do some of the apps, or there's some local resources, or you're welcome to email me. I teach free online. All of my teachings are free. Lecture, if you think your business or you know people that would be interested in this, I love talking about it. I think it's just so potentially valuable. In many ways, I think it's an antidote to a lot of what's going on. But that's it. Is there Q&A here? Okay, yeah, sure. No questions? All right. Say what? Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you guys very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. For every speaker, we'd like to present a rotary pen. And we ask that the first use of this pen be used to put a little introduction in the front of a book that will be placed in the library at Washington Elementary School. And so for the month of November, we've been doing things that are kind of Halloween related, although this one is called Finding Wonders, which may relate to your speech just a little bit. So if you could put a message in the front of that, and thank you very much for coming today.
Hey, Jeff.
What's that?
I was just.
Oh, Lisa, you had a, hold on, let's get you mic'd up so we can hear you. Go ahead.
This is always very interesting because meditation's been proven to have success in a multitude of ways. But from the scientific community, has there been studies that actually say these people from a physiological perspective, had a heart attack or had their blood pressure was this and that lead them into a path of saying, okay, from this point to this point, these people became more healthful. These people documented this, and obviously there's self-help books, but I'm just meaning from the science of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, there's now, I don't know, 10 to 15,000 papers, all of which demonstrate, I shouldn't say all of which, but the vast majority of them demonstrate that there's some significant utility to the practice. You can literally go to PubMed, which is the database of the Library of Medicine, and type in mindfulness and anything that's bothering you, hiccuping too much or insomnia or certainly depression, anxiety, that kind of stuff. And you'll pull up meta-analyses that explain the research and then show the benefits. Now, it's not, it's not the solution. It's not 100% solution for everything. When you're running into trouble, you got to throw all the levers, sleep, exercise, diet, but it's a very valuable tool. And because you guys gave me the microphone back, some of the really fascinating work is on the people, the Olympic meditators that have been meditating for a long period of time. They absolutely have changes in their brain and in their body that demonstrate very favorable alterations related to the practice. So, thank you.
And there you have it. If you want to win an Olympic medal, you better use mindfulness.